welcome to another episode of WYTPod, the online community for e-commerce entrepreneurs and businesses. Today we have a very special guest with us. He is the founder of homebirds.com, and his name is Albert Vita. Albert, thanks a lot for joining us today. How's everything going? How are you?
Well, hello to everybody. Hello, Mark, and hello, everyone tuning in from Atlanta, Georgia. We're doing well. The summer is finally starting to cool down a little bit, but we're doing awesome. Thank you for having me today.
Great. So let's jump in and just learn a little bit about you. So if you wouldn't mind, can you share some of your background with us?
Sure. So keeping in mind, the focus of your podcast and for the audience. So my background is in management consulting with McKinsey and IBM and Deloitte. Retail, in particular, was the industry sector that I've spent most of my career in. About 8 years ago, I started with Home Depot and started as a director of merchandising strategies and omni-channel strategy and emerging technology. And so the role that I had at Home Depot certainly was thinking through about not only retail, but home improvement specifically, and certainly thinking through about the digital experience. How does that marry up with our physical stores, right? And as you know, Home Depot it's a national brand with 2,300 stores across the country. It's a $151 billion company. It's Fortune 20, right? And yet there are so many unique e-commerce dynamics to home improvement. Everything from just cube size. We're talking about big items, refrigerators, countertops, water heaters. So we're not shipping sweaters and books, so there's some unique dynamics for cube size, and then even like product customer segmentation. Like within the home improvement world, Mark, there's two primary customer segments: the homeowner, or what we would call the DIY, and then as well as the professional contractor,
Right.
the pro. And so, or sometimes I refer to it as B2B or B2C. But either way, each customer segment certainly has different retail buying habits, and certainly that translates to online e-commerce buying habits. And really the third sort of influence here are just the product categories, right? You take a company like a Lowe's or a Depot, with 15 or so major merchandising departments across lumber, plumbing, appliances, garden. And the reality is that each one of these product segments is different. And so certainly that has to translate into a digital experience as well. You don't buy a refrigerator or shop for refrigerators the same way that you shop for lawn fertilizer or online, or shop
Right.
for paint online or lumber online. So certainly some product differences right there, but I'm excited to get into it today.
Fantastic. So, I know you mentioned Home Depot and Lowe's and everything, but what was the true inspiration for you to get into the online e-com retail business?
Yeah, I think it always is going to start with a passion for just some basics, I have a passion for retail overall, right? And so as I mentioned before, even before home improvement, we spent 15 years as a consultant for companies like Walmart, Target, and CVS, and Macy's, and as a consultant, you get in deep with really the omni-channel aspects of retail. And then so certainly when I got to Home Depot, a lot of that retail background carried over. And so now when I left Home Depot within the past year or so, it was really thinking through around how are we going to solve for friction that is in the existing customer journey, right? And then also too, as a startup, you don't have infinite funding, or you don't have infinite resources, and so you have to kind of be strategic around where are you going to place your bets in terms of the money and time and energy and focus that you have. So certainly for me, I wake up every day passionate about that intersection of home improvement, retail, and emerging technology. And really, for me, my definition of of digital goes even beyond e-commerce. As you start to think through what are some of the impacts of AI and the metaverse, but certainly how do you improve the digital experience overall, but really staying firmly grounded in just the pain points. I just call it friction, right? But at the end of the day, this is an industry that's just ripe for improvement, ripe for disruption. So that's where I live right now.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, going through your site, it's quite unique. It seemed very unique to me. And it seems to me that you have kind of a soft spot for noobs and people who obviously you say it straight away that you have packages designed for new homeowners. So
yeah,
I'm no Bob Vila, even in my old age, okay? But I remember when I bought my first home, and it was a challenge for sure. So I wish I had something like this way back then. So and you have starter packs and you have seasonal packs. Can you talk more about sort of the subscriptions and the bundle packages that you have?
Yeah, sure. I would love an informal survey of your audience of who knows who Bob Vila even is, right? So I would be curious.
All right. What's the guy from Home Improvement? Maybe I should have said Pamela Anderson. Everybody knows who she is, right?
Knows that, and so there's no question, right? As I mentioned before, even before you get to the technology, e-commerce or digital or disruption, I'm firmly grounded on pain points and really that customer experience. And let's be honest, right? Like, as I mentioned before, there's two primary customer segments, the homeowner and the professional contractor. The reality is the professional contractor, right? They know what they're doing. They're experts. They know where to go. They know what to buy. They know the quantities that they need. And really the number one pain point for a pro is really quantity on hand, right? And speed and efficiency. But really when it comes to the homeowner side, it's a whole different type of friction. The friction that I've seen, certainly in my experience with Home Depot, but even today, is education, right? It is daunting, right? Like, if you start
100%.
thinking about the accelerated home purchase pattern for millennials, that was really accelerated because of COVID, right? There was just a startling article in USA Today earlier this year where the headline just floored me and made me stop my tracks. The headline read, 84% of new first-time young home buyers regret the purchase of buying their new home. And I thought, 84%, man, that's a lot. I was reading through the article, and the number one regret or the number one concern for these young homeowners is underestimating the cost and the intensity of what it takes to do home maintenance. And so really enter in e-commerce, right? So then you start with that pain point, and now how can e-commerce or digital or mobile solve for that pain point, right? And so, and look, even, again, coming from big box, I know maybe this isn't, entirely unbiased, but if you take a step back, right? And for those listening, imagine your local Lowe's or your local Home Depot or your Menards, depending where you are in the country. These are working warehouse stores, 140,000, 150,000 square feet. I mean,
right. They should have their own zip codes.
Exactly right. I mean, that's the equivalent of about 3 football fields, 3 NFL football fields. And so as a customer, and you're looking around for this widget, right? I don't even know what this widget's called, right? But I know it fell off of my faucet. So look, at the end of the day, there's an important need for education, and there's the needs of a younger or a first-time homeowner is a lot different than an experienced DIYer or certainly pro. But my philosophy, Mark, always is start with the customer, start with the friction and the pain point, start with the data, right? And really it's always around how can technology help solve for that. And so at the end of the day, I'm much more passionate about customer problems and solving friction than I ever am about the specific technology or platforms or payment methods or any of the specific disruptive tech that's out there. Certainly that has a role to play, but it's just my philosophy. I'm just firmly grounded in that human side before we get to the tech side.
Well, I think it's a great business model as well, because you're educating people. If they have a good experience the first time they shop with you, they have a video that shows them which caulking they should buy and, tips for how to caulk their kitchen sink correctly, and they have a good experience. They're going to be your customer for life, right? I mean, they're just going to keep coming back.
At the end of the day, it's, as I mentioned before, there are different levels of knowledge within home improvement as well, right?
Yeah.
So, if I could just take a moment, and you've tapped into a really key point that I think e-commerce is uniquely helpful with, which is education, right? And what's happened in home improvement today is just what I call this exponential explosion of decisions that a customer has to make, right? So even when you take a simple concept like paint, so let's say, for example, I'm looking behind you, you've got some mirrors, but behind me, let's say that a homeowner wants to paint their office or their living room, they want to paint something, right? Well, you get to the home improvement store, right? It turns out, right, that first of all, just selecting color is a big point of friction, right? Because just selecting
You're
the color.
not kidding.
Exactly. So once you select the color, which brand of paint? Are you thinking Valspar or PPG or Behr, right? Or Benjamin Moore, right? Or sure, I don't know the differences, right? And then, okay, well, let's say I'm going to use Behr paint. Well, then the next decision you have is sheen. There's about 10 different sheens: flat, matte, eggshell, right? And then I don't know what's the right sheen.
I chose
right?
eggshell last time.
Exactly, right. And then, so for me,
popular
I'm
choice, I
thinking
think.
about this exponential explosion of decisions that a customer has to make. It's not easy. That's why the average number of trips to a hardware store when you're working on a paint project is 6. I mean, 6 trips to the store when you're doing a paint project. You go to the first one to pick your color. You go to the second one, finalize the color and maybe get a sample. The third trip is to buy your paint. The fourth trip, you forgot your rollers or your tarp, right?
Whatever.
Your 5th trip is you've run out. All right, and your 6th
spackle. What about spackle?
Exactly
spackle.
right.
I need a cutting knife
to return all of the excess stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is that like 6 trips to the store, that's what I would call friction, right? And so again, thinking through subscription models and thinking through, hey, is there an opportunity here to really just, like I said before, start with the customer pain point and work backwards and say, hey, let us do some of the thinking for you. Let us tell you what you need, right? Even though you think you don't need masking tape and tarp, right? Even though you think you don't need 4 types of brushes, trust me, you do, right? right? Whether it's trim a brush or a roller brush or a sealing brush, right? Just let us do
the whole thing is, if you've done it before, you know it already, but your audience is for people who have never done it before, and they can't necessarily afford to pay someone to come and do it, so they have to do it themselves. So,
and like I said before, my vision, for where e-commerce and digital transformation is going, I mean, there is a long runway for this entire industry, right? And let's go beyond, like, really, what we've been talking about now is e-commerce as a means to deliver product, right? But let's take a step back and say, well, how can e-commerce really deliver 10x the value to the customer beyond just delivering the product, right? Because obviously it's table stakes, right? Okay, like say, you'll place an order, get it to the house, I get it, right? But that's basics, right? But what are the other ways that we can create value, through e-commerce and through technology, even on top of delivery of a product? So you start thinking about other value adding strategies, from education as well as potentially thinking through about how you might be able to save, or even ongoing maintenance, right? Because the average home in the US today is 37 years old. It's almost 40 years old, the average home, right? So in these homes, Mark, they need help. I mean, it's just like there's TLC
Sure.
needed in, externally to the home, internally, in front of the walls, behind the walls. There's just a lot of maintenance, I really think that this is a environment that's ripe with friction, with problems, with opportunities for technology to come in and
It's
reinvent
better-
and transform.
Better hope the plumbing and electrical are okay. At least.
Yeah, exactly
Right.
right. But like I said
Otherwise,
before,
yeah,
I mean, home improvement overall, I mean, like you take a step broader and you start thinking about some of the other disruptive technology trends that are happening now, things like AI and how that might be able to assist you with home maintenance as a homeowner, and helping you manage some of that data. And certainly the growing trend of smart home, right? Like everyone's got like Alexas and Hey Googles and Ring doorbells, but that we're the tip of the iceberg, Mark, in terms of IoT.
sure.
And so really you start to think about like when everything in your home starts to get connected and that data that it generates, right? And then how can technology commerce like even come into play that way? So there's certainly a long runway of emerging technology, and we talked about the metaverse already and what that's going to mean. AR, VR, those. So, and then of course, if the home improvement retailers have to adapt accordingly, right? The Lowe's and the Depots and Aces
Sure.
and the neighborhood all have to adapt accordingly as well.
Look, I'm sure you've had some challenges with shipping. That must have been one of the big challenges that you faced, especially with larger items, appliances and things like that. How have you tackled that?
Oh my gosh. Well, here, I'm gonna lean into my camera, Mark, and I'm gonna tell you and your audience like just the truth. I would say that supply chain concerns, the increasing freight is my #1 issue. I mean, like if for me, products and the industry knowledge, I mean, that's the easy part. That's my comfort zone. But really, how do you navigate the supply chain and the increasing costs right now? Originally, it was like thinking buy versus build. So eventually the shop that I created was on Shopify. Which unto itself has a few discounts for supply chain, but even with any kind of discounts that platform provides, I mean, just straight up UPS, man, or FedEx, or just the increased cost. I mean, it's so margin.
I mean, depending on where you are, if you buy a washing machine, then the shipping might cost more than the washing machine, right?
I mean, like the increasing supply chain costs are so margin destructive. I mean, it's killer, right? I mean, like there's just a famous quote by the CFO of Home Depot, Richard McPhail, and he talked about it. And he said, an online order for Home Depot is like roughly 70% more profitable when Home Depot can ship its order to a store and then have the customer like buy online, pick it up in the store, BOPUS, right? Versus HomeDepot.com shipping directly to your house, right? And that makes complete sense, right? Because from a retailer perspective, you're driving to your stores every day anyway. So to add a BOPUS order, there's like minimal cost, to get it to the store that way, and especially if the customer picks it up, right? But that door to door and just the classic last mile, I mean, it's in my opinion has not yet been solved, right? And to me, that when even industry wise, when you see large e-commerce companies, whether it's a Depot or an Amazon or a Lowe's, and they're spending billions on shipping containers and their own air transportation and really just building out their own supply chain, it makes complete sense to me, right? Because with all due respect to the existing, like 3PLs and sort of like logistics and even just like a UPS or a FedEx, with all due respect, it's just so margin destructive. So now that being said, like we said, then you throw in the unique characteristics of home improvement, right? Heavy, large cube types of items, right? And you can't, a lot of the times, you, as much as you can, and even with just being like strategic about supply chain costs, there's unquestionably the #1 sort of headwind for growth that I would say for e-commerce brands and sort of is certainly around supply chain, right?
Yeah.
And I would argue that most founders of e-commerce brands are like me, where there's, hey, look, the apparel or makeup or home improvement. I mean, that's the comfort zone, and you're easy talking about vision. You know what I mean? And where are we going and where could we become? But the devil's in the details. And one of those details is just the increasing supply chain costs. It's just certainly for me, the most sobering lesson that I've learned, certainly in a B2C entrepreneurial journey is around supply chain and how critical it is that it cannot be an afterthought, right?
Like so many
cannot be an afterthought.
retailers on Amazon, they all use the Amazon fulfillment, for more than one reason, right? Your credibility is there, trust is added and all that. But it's just a huge headache that's gone from the equation, even though it's so expensive. And as you said, it cuts into the margins quite a bit, but it's worth it for most of the retailers. So if you're doing that
I appreciate
yourself, hats off. I mean, that's a tough part of the job, but that's going to pad your margins, obviously.
Well, at the end of the day, like I said before, my vision for anything entrepreneurial that I'm doing is really, thinking about the industry overall, right? Because like I said before, I really do believe that getting a customer the product, right? Custom places an order, ends up at their front door, that's table stakes, right? So at the end of the day, the benchmark I'm thinking about is, and really the question that I wake up thinking about is, how do we create 10x the value digitally, right? Or through disruptive technology or emerging technology on top of just delivering product, right? And so that's why for me, the vision here is certainly starting off with sort of door-to-door sort of product, but really thinking through where and how can we create more value for this industry and the manufacturers and the retailers and the customers in this industry, above and beyond delivery of the product.
Right. That's a true value add. Everyone else is delivering product.
Well, so that's table stakes, right?
Exactly.
The reality is it's infinite. I mean, it's infinite that you can get, anyone can buy, hey, like a garden gloves and, fertilizer and shovels anywhere, right? But I'm saying that, so obviously offering a product at the lowest price and financial benefits, right? I guess at the end of the day, I would define value in 4 or 5 different ways. Certainly economic value, and so like, hey, we're going to offer try to offer a competitive price. So just that's value, but time, energy, right? Effort, right? And
how about stress reduction?
Exactly,
it's a very stressful.
That is a value add.
That's the key thing, right?
Exactly.
People are very mindful of their mental health these days, aren't they? I mean, you don't want to have painting your bedroom to be, life-altering, stressful exercise that you're doing, right?
Well, the reality is that home maintenance, is a year-round activity. It's not a one and done, right? Yeah. So, I mean, springtime, there's specific needs around, hey, like thinning out gutters or maybe doing some weather stripping. Summer rolls around, you got to be thinking about some pest control and some HVAC, right? Fall rolls around, you start thinking about maybe some decor, right? And maybe some flooring and winter rolls around, right? Then you start thinking about as well, there's just unique needs from a home year round. And so the decision fatigue, certainly from a homeowner perspective, is not just for home improvement, but as a customer, right? And so, and that's why I think,
I'll remember that.
Like, how many do you, Mark? Do you happen to know what size of air filter your HVAC uses right now? Right? Or for example, like when was the last
time take a picture and send it
your water filter in your fridge? Right?
And truthfully, I'm kind of a lunatic. I am an analytical guy, so I'm always afraid of making a mistake. And the way I shop is insane in the first place. Trust me.
But at the end of the day,
it resonates with me.
Before, right? Creating value for the customer, solving for friction, right? And we define value in a lot of ways beyond price. But certainly thinking also longer term, right? Because look, the reality is that the homes are getting smarter, right? And
Yeah.
beyond your Ring doorbell and Alexa speaker, right? What happens when your front door is smart? When your lawnmowers can text you, your ovens, and like even right now, right? Your barbecue will text you, right? Hey, Albert, your hamburger is precisely the medium rare temperature that you want.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like your
Yeah.
barbecue grills will text you, and
And
so
your
that's good for
refrigerator will
us.
create a shopping list for you
Oh,
and send it to
exactly
you.
right.
All that stuff like
Like
that. Yeah.
I'd be at Kroger or Publix, and do I need orange juice? I could. There's internal cameras into your fridge, right? That can show you inside. I'm like, oh, I can
Yeah,
clear. I'm at the grocery store and I could look inside my fridge.
that's the
And
truth.
so I just think that as products are innovating, certainly within the home, and I just think that it just increases that exponential complexity for home maintenance and home improvement. And so homeowners have to evolve, retailers have to evolve, distributors and manufacturers all have to evolve. And yet, what's really interesting is I saw a recent study from McKinsey where they looked at all industries from entertainment and banking and insurance and fintech, and it was just sort of oil and gas and sort of building materials, sort of home construction was the least digitally penetrated industry on a list of maybe 30 different industries. And it makes total sense, right? Because if most people don't think about how their insulation impacts what are the digital impacts of their insulation, or hey, my tile flooring, or hey, my sod on my front yard, right? So a lot of the times digital transformation, digital adoption, even in this entire industry, has actually been slower than other industries, just as sort of a norm. I mean, just again, compared to like fintech or oil and gas, banking, and all the other types of industries out there, just home improvement and building materials and construction has a slower adoption curve for digital overall.
Right. I would buy into that. I think people are just programmed to drive down to Lowe's or Home Depot. It's just like it's their own personal purgatory or something. They have to go and do it, right? And it's next to the to PetSmart, so might as well. So it's it's a new thing to get used to. But it seems like you have a unique take on it that I think it is going to provide a lot of value as you are targeting new homeowners. Like I said, if I had this when I was first getting started, it would have been great for me. Now, finally, Albert, is there any message you'd like to give to anyone starting a brand new e-commerce business for themselves?
Yeah, and it's almost, I've given this a lot of thought, and certainly in the past year that I've left corporate America and started my own entrepreneurial journey, I mean, really, there's three sort of key lessons, certainly, that really stand out for me. Number one is the importance of knowing when to pivot, right? It's sort of within the entrepreneurial startup world, the pivot is just, not staying married to the original vision of the business, right? Like, I think that knowing when to pivot and knowing when to transform your operating model, your business model as needed, right? And so I think that there's a certain amount of when you're locked into sort of an overall vision and what are the values that your startup represents, but then and maybe not being flexible on those. So like, hey, integrity and value those are things that I'm never going to go away with. But how I deliver that, oh my gosh, it's changing radically, right? Even to the point where everything is fair game for reinvention. So lesson number one is be ready to pivot. Number two, we talked about it already, which is just the devil is in the details. And for me, supply chain costs and logistics were a huge wake-up call. Like I spent months on packaging design and thinking through that customer experience. And I'm telling you, man, I left sort of supply chain and delivery just as an afterthought. And it was just a huge, huge wake up call. And I would say that to other startup founders, lean into your discomfort, right? Meaning that like we as professionals all have strengths and weaknesses. And for me, it was always around merchandising, products, strategy, right? Pricing, just the traditional retail world, that's just my strength. But certainly getting into some of the financial aspects, calculating margin, and certainly supply chain, or not my strengths, right? So I think that as a founder, I stayed with my comfort zone. And I would just say lean into your discomfort, because for me, by the time I got around to, facing some of those less, strength areas of mine, it blew out my model. Like I had no model because it was just incredibly margin destructive that, again, I would do that differently, right? So number one, pivot. Number two, lean into your discomfort, and for me, the example is around supply chain. Really, number three, right, is the one thing that I would mention certainly, right, is there's such a rich ecosystem of resources that like I didn't know existed. Right. Like, so I spent my entire 25-year corporate America career really in that sort of corporate America world. I never knew how many resources from local universities to local startup organizations to just VCs in my area that might be willing to have conversations with me, or even other founders, right? There is a rich support structure, and a lot of it doesn't cost anything, right? You just have to reach out, and certainly founders that have reached out to me, let's just talk shop, right? And it's just sort of like, I would just certainly say that was
talking my language now.
Yeah, that was just like a big positive wake-up call, right? For me, was just that, because I think that startup founders want to help, man. It's like they know how painful it is.
They do want to help. Yeah.
There's, obviously you can't spend like 5 hours, but like, hey, quick 5 minutes and just sort of like, what did you do when that happened, or just a quick, word of encouragement, or if you ever need anything, let's grab a Starbucks or something. But I'm just saying that like tap into that as quickly as you can.
Couldn't agree more. Those are all gems. And it's true that, the community is very helpful and very supportive. So reach out if you don't.
Right. Your podcast is a great example, right? Look at this wonderful information in this library you've created for free, right? And so.
And you've enriched it quite a bit today, Albert, to say the least, with your wisdom and your energy. Been fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, and certainly, reach out to me on LinkedIn, anyone listening, and I'm happy to, be part of your support structure as well. And certainly if anyone has any questions about home improvement, certainly
contact details in the description.
Yeah,
Albert.
And certainly LinkedIn is a great way to reach out as well.
Thanks a ton for joining us.
Yeah, Mark, thank you for having me. All the best for you and your team as well.
Take care.
Take care, friends.